Hi everyone, my name is Darren Mange, and this is debate three, discussing the federal government should regulate the cost of pharmaceuticals. I'm in group two, which is in the supporting position. So to begin, a brief overview. There's really no current regulations that mandate the price of pharmaceuticals that strictly mandate the exact specific price of prescription drugs. Um, and prices of prescription drugs have become uncontrolled in the United States. They've increased by more than 16% between 2016 and 2023, which is about $80 billion. And they're continuing to rise and they're expected to rise. Federal government should regulate the cost of prescription drugs for two specific reasons. Guaranteeing access to affordable prescription drugs to Americans prevent negative health outcomes. And then drugs are already regulated by the FDA, specifically for their safety, which gives precedence to regulate it for its cost and price as well. So to begin with access to prescription drugs, one's right to access medications is technically embedded in the U.S. Constitution. So Americans are guaranteed the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Prescription drugs for many chronic diseases um, allow pursuit of at least two of those things. Um, and then the United States is responsible for the general welfare, which is a responsibility embedded in the Constitution as well. So the United States has a right to regulate the cost of prescription drugs to ensure Americans have that right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Just to add on to that, 1 in 4 Americans struggle with paying for prescription drugs, um, and that's either with insurance, without insurance, either paying for out of pocket, or even with a copayment as well. So, kind of really get into it. Prescription drugs have become alarmingly unaffordable. So I provided a couple of examples. So insulin is required for diabetes management. Um, Increases in costs has actually led to patients rationing, so he's only using half a dose and trying to spread that dose out or skipping doses altogether, which does not provide positive health outcomes for diabetes. There's actually been 89% increase in out-of-pocket expenditures um, for insulin between 2000 and 2010 among insured adults in the United States. And another kind of example, pharmaceutical greed has extremely limited access to an certain antiparasitic. So this drug was developed in the 1950s and approved by the FDA back then, and has been a constant, source of treatment for parasitic infections. And that price of the original price of a pill was about $13.5. And then a certain company acquired, I guess, the patent of that drug, and raised the price to $750 per pill. Um, and insurance companies and other facilities weren't able to afford that pill and weren't covering that pill as well. And other alternatives were not as effective. They didn't help cure the infection, or they had greater health effects, where in that case the risk outweighed the benefits of using that pill. So it's a better alternative to not even take the alternative for that antiparasitic. Um, and then also to add on, EpiPens, which are used to treat allergic reactions, have also alarmingly risen in cost, costing about $100 for a 2-pack, now raising to about $600 for a pack of two. Um, and that can be alarming for, especially for kids who are in schools and have an allergic reaction and they don't have that EpiPen available because it is expensive, which can lead to negative health outcomes. So again, to kind of wrap this section up, lack of regulations among pharmaceutical companies that target cost leads to negative outcomes, leads to negative health outcomes. And to talk about specialty drugs, so these are drugs developed for rare conditions, are typically more expensive to develop. Um, So prices rise due to a lack of competition. So these specialty drugs, when they're developed, they're usually the first of their kind, and there's no other products like it on the market. So that company develops that drug can price uh, that drug as expensive or as inexpensive as they want, and so they usually try to make a profit because they can. They don't have to compete with another drug. People who need the medication are going to buy it because there's no other option. So the example for this is hepatitis C medication. So the cost to make this drug to cure the Hep C infection was it's $100,000 for a 12-week course. It was priced at $80,000 for the consumer, which most people cannot afford that. And insurance companies, specifically public insurance companies, so like Medicaid and Medicare, couldn't cover a lot of it because they just couldn't afford it. They would just be spending billions of dollars to fund this medication to cover their beneficiaries. The manufacturer of this medication made about $26 billion in profit in less than 2 years just from the Hep C medications alone, not including their other products. Um, so another thing regarding specialty drugs, there's been a decline in profits because they have been so expensive that people can't afford them, which leads to less development. Which it can be an alarming thing because less development of prescription drugs means there's not drugs being developed that are either more affordable or targeting a condition that does not have any treatment available. Um, so, kind of with this, there needs to be regulations that support the development of specialty drugs, but also controls their costs. So there's definitely a crisis regarding drug spending in the United States, and the government needs to step in um, to lower those costs and make these life-saving treatments more available. Another point, the FDA already regulates prescriptions. So the FDA regulates the safety of prescription drugs. They go through uh, a very extensive approval process that can be quite expensive. But with that precedence, why can't they regulate the price? So, kind of a little more specific regarding the approval process. It tends to reduce competition and uh, and consequently raising the costs. So changes to FDA regulations can also decrease the cost of prescription drugs. So adding other regulations in there can help make the prescription drugs more affordable. And now to kind of start wrapping things up. So possible regulations that the federal government can implement to control the cost. Um, some of them are already in place, but are not frequently used. So Section 1498 of the U.S. Code permits U.S. government to, on a federal perspective, to produce patented medications on their own without approval. Seems to be a typo there. Without approval from the owner of the patent or the developer of that medication. The only, I guess, um, part of that is they have to compensate the developer with some royalties um, from the distribution of that medication. They can also place caps on out-of-pocket costs for drugs managing severe diseases. So that can be for specialty drugs or just common drugs for chronic diseases. Placing caps allows pharmaceutical companies to not raise their costs too extensively and makes them more affordable and accessible um, for those who need them, specifically vulnerable and low-income populations. Also producing more generic medications, which also leads to that last point, to create a competitive market. More competition um, in the pharmaceutical industry forces companies to drive their costs down to make sure people are choosing their their prescription drug, their medication, because it's cheaper and also more effective. And in conclusion, and just in general, pharmaceutical companies are businesses trying to make a profit. Without regulations, costs can skyrocket, and the people would suffer. So government must make regulations to protect the consumer, because high costs can reduce access to prescription drugs, but also increase negative health outcomes. And again, drug safety is already regulated by the government, so price should also be regulated. Here are my references, and that is my presentation.